All right, so let's dive into the reread here. This is chapter 4, Eddard, and so we will have a recap here. Get this one, Matt?
The recap of chapter 3. So last week we read chapter 3, Daenerys. Daenerys is prepared by her brother Viserys for her arranged marriage with Khal Drogo. Daenerys gets nervous, but she doesn't want to wake the dragon.
Yeah, who does, honestly?
Well, we'll find out later who does.
Who does?
Oh, gosh. If she only knew, she could. Viserys is such a little, what. All right, so we're on to now then chapter 4, Eddard, and so the summary here, just a short little bit, we won't spoil too much. Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, has made his way to Winterfell. Eddard and Robert were good friends. They were essentially brothers, and I think that's important to note, is that they kind of, in everything but blood, they were brothers.
Well, they grew up together.
Yeah, exactly. They grew up together, and there was this. We'll get into more about his actual brothers, versus his relationship with Ned. Robert pays his respects to Lyanna Stark's tomb right out the gate. Robert and Eddard briefly discuss the rebellion and the Battle of the Trident. Robert has come to ask Eddard to be his new Hand of the King, because if you recall, 2 chapters ago we talked about Jon Arryn and Jon Arryn's passing. He was Hand of the King. And he has passed, and he passed rather suddenly. So, yeah. All right. So there's your summary. Let's dive into some of the details. First third, we always divide this up into thirds. We're going to talk about Robert Baratheon. All right. We're also going to talk about Lyanna Stark in our second third, and then we will talk about Hand of the King, and really it's the responsibilities there and what all that kind of means for Ned. So. All right, let's just start with Robert Baratheon. I'm just going to read something I pulled this part. The first part here I pulled directly from the wiki, which is just Robert Baratheon, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, head of House Baratheon in King's Landing. He was crowned king after Aerys Targaryen, his first cousin, once removed, which is interesting, was killed during Robert's rebellion. Following the war, Robert married Cersei Lannister to ensure political stability. They've got 3 children, Joffrey, is that right? Marcella?
Yeah. Marcella.
Yeah, and Tommen. Mm-hmm. I guess I've never seen her name actually spelled out.
Yeah, that's true.
So from the book, I just love the description, how this kind of starts off. You see this, you see what Eddard has in his mind, and then his what he sees, what he remembers of his friend.
What did
right?
they say? It was 8 years?
Yeah, it had been 9 years since the rebellion.
Since the great Balon Greyjoy's rebellion.
That's right.
I think it had been 15 years since the
Robert's rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it had been a while since. I mean, you imagine even during the Greyjoy rebellion, he might have still fit this description that I'm going to read to you guys, which is 6.5 feet tall, clean shaven, clear eyed, and muscled like a maiden's fantasy.
Fabio. Gotcha.
So the smell of blood and leather clung to him during his youth, but he's changed.
Right.
He has definitely changed
significantly,
and I think it's just sort of like it's funny because Ned is like, when the column is coming north, he recognized all these different people, but he doesn't recognize the man in front.
Right.
He was being escorted by the Kingsguard. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's. When he shows up, I have in my notes here something that I found interesting is that the difference in the book and the show. Mm-hmm. In the show, he gets off the horse and like Ned Stark and everyone's standing there, and he walks over to him and he's like, "You've gotten old," and Ned Stark's like, "You've gotten fat," and everyone like looks, and then they hug and embrace. Yeah. Yeah. And in the book, it's just. He just gets off and he's just like, "Ned, happy to see you," and then he's like, "You're gonna grace."
Yeah. I actually like the way the show did it better.
I think it. I did better. I did too.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, but still, it just shows this respect. What's neat is Catelyn always talks about how these Northerners or these the Starks are just a different breed of people, and you really get this theme throughout this whole thing that they're frozen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Their expressions and their manner very just sort of cold and not cheerful, but just that they're very stiff and their humor is different and things like that. So, and anyways, also he hasn't seen his friend in 9 years, so he's happy to see him. And one of the coolest parts was when he right away says, "Take me down to the crypt."
Yeah.
And that is what gets a lot of respect. He's just like that. And Ned says, "I love him for that."
Right.
For immediately going down there.
Yeah.
Before that, he braces Cat, and like a long lost sister, which was nice to sort of see that. These are these big ruling, the most powerful people in the Seven Kingdoms. But they have these this history, and they're close. So. Yeah,
we also learned a little bit about his company riding with him, because they mentioned it at the end of the chapter. I have some highlights here. The crowned stag of Baratheon, which is specifically the crowned stag, because it didn't always used to be.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't always used to be that way. Sir Jaime Lannister with hair as bright as beaten gold, and there was Sandor Clegane with his terribly burned face. The imp Tyrion Lannister as well is riding along with him.
Yep. What's interesting too about that is that they're always, from the get-go, he is mentioning we're talking about bloodlines, or we're talking about
Hair color.
all
eye
of
color,
that. Exactly,
physical,
these traits,
appearances.
dominant recessive traits. Pay attention in biology class. Okay. So the seed is strong. We'll get to that later. But yeah. So he points out who's coming. Cersei Lannister is there, and we can talk about her in just a little bit here. But she is right out the gate. I mean, she's she's upset that that Robert wants to go right down to the crypts. She's like, we've been riding for a long time.
Right.
Come on, let's rest. Let's get the horses. Let's do whatever. And he just looks at her. Now I said in my notes here. Was there a more tactful way to go about doing what he wanted to do? Yes. Did he have to do all of that right in front of everyone? No, because that is his former betrothed, right? Lyanna Stark, going down to visit her, and his wife is standing next to him. It's
but he's the king.
He is the king, and that's why I love him for it. And that's and Ned doesn't care.
Yeah, she says like the dead would wait. And in the book, it's like one tiny little paragraph. In the show, you can tell it's a bigger deal.
Yes,
right. Like it's a bigger deal. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she makes a big scene. I mean, because he's kind of, everyone heard him say that, and you're getting to see him go. I don't know. It's just. And also, I mean, it's twofold, because it makes a lot of sense. You're traveling north. This whole rebellion started because of this. So to ignore it is not, not a polite thing either. So, but yeah, I kind of feel for Cersei, and I feel for Robert.
Yeah, right.
And as right after that, I have my quote of the week.
Yeah, what do you got?
This is Robert speaking. They went down to the crypt together, Ned and the king, as he scarcely recognized. The winding stone steps were narrow. Ned went first with the lantern. I was starting to think we would never reach Winterfell, Robert complained as they descended. In the south, the way they talk about my 7 kingdoms, a man forgets that your parts is as big as the other 6 combined.
Yeah, I also was thinking.
So that's the first time we hear just about how massive and expansive that the North is. Because the previous chapters we've heard about some of the differences with Catelyn. We hear the differences between the gods, and some smaller differences. But this is the first one we hear specifically about that.
Yeah, and it's they elaborate a little bit more on it too, because he's talking about where are your people? What's going on? Where's everybody at? He's like, oh, they're probably just too shy, Your Grace, and he's like, or hiding under all this snow. So, and I think people it's summer right now, but yet there's snow in the north. So you get these they call them late summer snows, I think, or something like that. So the South kind of forgets that sometimes. It's summer, but yet it's snowing, up north. So that's neat. So we get into we're getting to the point where we're gonna step down into and start talking about Lyanna Stark. But before we get there, Robert Baratheon, when they're down in the crypt, you can tell he's a man of pleasure. Right?
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, that's all he talks about for a good 2 to 3 paragraphs. Is basically all this stuff where he's talking about how the women they run around Ned.
Yeah, they might as well
Naked.
be naked. Yeah,
You know,
and he talks about just drinking wine and being fat. And
yeah,
all
but
the fruits and
they're just there's a fire fruit though in there somewhere, which was interesting.
yeah.
He made this reference to fire again, and I also thought it was kind of cool that. Robert is when he's talking about the women, and it's so hot down there, that it doesn't matter whether they're wearing silks or cotton. So again, to him, doesn't matter whether they're royalty or it's a common girl. He doesn't really care.
Oh, he doesn't.
And that actually says a lot about who he is. He has all these bastards. When he was in the Eyrie, or in the Vale, he hooked up with, I think, a lesser, maybe I can't remember exactly who it was that he has. He has a bastard there, though.
Right.
And that was something that Lyanna actually was kind of like, I don't know if I could ever keep him to just one bed.
Right. That's something that comes up a lot. This idea that, like, even I think Ned says it later that.
But I disagree with her, actually.
Yeah.
And I think she says that, and that's sort of, I don't know that I would like to know when he was betrothed to her. If he did that before, if he actually even knew who she was yet, or had really been struck by her beauty, and things like that. So
that's a lot of what ifs.
It is, it is. But I think the way, when he did meet her and he was fighting in the tourney and these different things, I think he really did grow to love her. And some people have said it's just it's the idea that he didn't get her. It was just something that he didn't get. But I do think. There was something there, though, that this is someone he would have loved through and through, and probably been more faithful to than what he was with Cersei. Yeah. He wouldn't have done things like he's done to Cersei. So, in my opinion, but So, anyways, he talks more about the pleasures of those things and talking about how cold it is down in those in the crypts, and then they talk about the crypts a little bit, and they talk about the tombs and who it is that lay down there.
Yeah, I have a line here about just how it goes here. By ancient custom, an iron longsword had been laid across the lap of each who had been the Lord of Winterfell to keep the vengeful spirits in their crypts. The oldest had long ago rusted away to nothing, leaving only a few red stains where the metal had rusted on stone. Ned wondered if that meant those ghosts were free to roam the castle now. He'd hoped not. The first lords of Winterfell had been as men hard as the land they ruled. In the centuries before the dragon lords came over the sea, they had sworn allegiance to no man, styling themselves the kings in the north. Yeah. So there's that line, king in the north, already.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, and we talked about how vast it is, and it's sort of like, we'll get in later to how during Aegon's conquest, it was more like, and Daenerys brings it up later, it was... basically to avoid all this death and destruction and things. I wonder how those dragons would have fared up in Winterfell and things like that. So I think the North is a force to be reckoned with. But anyways,
I just think it's interesting if you go back a couple chapters. This is the first chapter where we don't hear the name Mance Rayder. We've heard it in all of the other chapters, including the prologue. Mm-hmm. But this chapter we hear about. So we heard Robert's rebellion. Now the previous chapter, Daenerys, where we heard a little bit more about what kind of caused it and what was going on there. Here we hear about the Greyjoy rebellion. So subtly, we're just more and more getting this idea of, wow, there's a lot of wars that go on in these kingdoms, and a lot of power play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we get, I guess, when you start in this book, you're going to get a couple of those different skirmishes and wars and things that are happening. But yeah, I bet you on a smaller scale too, we sort of got this in Dunk and Egg where you have one house warring against another house under because what was her name? Remember the drought? We had the drought and she was the Red Widow, just little tiny skirmishes like that kind of break out and those types of things. Really, those are getting settled by, if that were to happen in Winterfell, a Stark would deal with that. If that were to happen, in the Vale, someone like Jon Arryn would have dealt with that. So it's whoever the warden is, the warden of the North or the warden of the East or the West or what have you. So
Lady Weber,
yes, yeah, and she was I forget who it was, the Checky Lion. She was who she was. they ended up getting married.
Yeah.
Which was cool. But that's just one little tiny thing. Imagine all of these houses. We've talked about Sir Adam Parker, in his house, and maybe they've got a little skirmish going on with the house just south of them, because they control this money and stuff. And we got that in the video game, didn't we? We got that in the
Telltale game, the Game of Thrones with the Iron. Who are they? House Forrester.
House Forrester. That's right. Yeah, and their fight against and keeping the production of the
Ironwood.
The Ironwood. So I don't know. That's kind of the cool stuff, but we see it on a larger scale. But Gur will even write in some of this stuff that's between house and house, smaller houses and stuff. So
right.
I think it's kind of cool. All right, I think now we're ready to dive into Lyanna Stark, actually. So let's see here. She was when you think about Ned had his older brother Brandon Stark,
yes,
and his younger sister Lyanna Stark. So those are his siblings, and so she is 16 years old when she dies. Is that right? I was trying to figure this out because it says that, but I kind of wondered if that was true.
Yeah, there's only a line in here. Had only been 16, a child woman with surpassing loveliness. Ned had loved her with all his heart. Robert loved her even more. She was to have been his bride, but
right. Yeah, and so, but my question. So I'm thinking to myself, when she's at the tourney of, which tourney was that?
Harrenhal.
Was that Harrenhal? Yeah, you're right. When she was there, how old was she then that she, got the. I'm
gonna do some. I'll do some.
Do
math.
I'll do
some math.
Do some math because it is interesting. Because I'm thinking, I want to know more about,
so she's
Rhaegar.
17 when she dies.
17
So
when
that
she
means you take subtract 9 months for John's.
No.
Don't spoil it.
No, that's fine. No. It's good. Because I'm about to talk about Rhaegar. Because it's like, there's this whole piece.
So she's probably 16 when she gets abducted. Or pregnant.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, and he takes her to Dorne, and I'm guessing Elia Martell is a part of this. Can I be honest with you guys about something?
No.
Okay, then I won't. All right. So here's the thing. When you really think about this, you've got Rhaegar and you've got Elia Martell, right? Older, established relationship, couple, etc., influencing this 16-year-old girl. And maybe perhaps there was some spells, some magic, some stuff that was going on. They get her involved in this whole. Maybe they fill her head with some of this stuff, or I really want to know more about that.
It wasn't true love, as
I'm trying to say that maybe it wasn't.
Whoa.
Because they make all sorts of references. Viserys says that his brother fought for his true love, and Dany kind of believes that. But when she's being betrothed, she's sort of thinking, "I wish someone would come and rescue me." Something like that. That would be kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking, man, she's awful young for this to be going on, and maybe it was
by our standards today. But if you think about like feudal life, that's
when you only live to be like 40. People are getting married at like
no,
12
I don't necessarily mean like the age. I get that. I think it's fine that they're in a relationship. Like it would be fine for her at this age. A lot of the girls at this, Sansa is as well.
Yeah.
Getting married and things like that. Well, Sansa's 11 now, but she's. But my point is, I guess that how much of this was she willing to, did she not love Robert Baratheon? Did she, she was promised to him, and you see what the breaking of promises when you get to the twins, right? And how that, that really hurt Robb, Stark, and him breaking his betrothal. So I don't know. I just would really like to know more about it because I don't know. I think he really influenced her, and there has to be this. He had to have presented to her this idea of the long night coming again.
Yeah.
Right? We read it earlier in the show, and if it is Azor Ahai and it's the, that
that's something that's not explained. Is why did she run off with him?
Yeah, like what?
We don't know that.
Because here's the thing.
That's why some people. All Shift X did a video on this, and he said he may have actually abducted her.
He may have because here's the thing. If they had the secret annulment and then a marriage, he's the crown prince.
Yeah.
Who's going to stop him? I mean,
Well, maybe he didn't tell her about Azor Ahai. Maybe he was just like, I'm divorcing her. I want to marry you. I want to overthrow my dad, because that was why a big thing everyone thought he was
the Tourney Heart. Yeah.
So maybe he was saying we can unite our kingdoms, because remember the Mad
True.
King just killed her brother and her dad, and he's like, no, you and I can get married and we can end this. And she's probably somebody who's think about Ned, very strong family ties.
You mean after he had abducted her, then they were killed?
Yeah.
Because they went down to King's Landing because she was abducted, and that's when they said, "Hey, we want get Rhaegar out here. We want to talk to him. We want his head," and that's when they kill her brother and her father.
Maybe they got together.
But Rhaegar wasn't there,
right? But maybe
your point is valid.
So maybe he didn't abduct her. So maybe they got married after the Tourney at Harrenhal.
Yeah,
and she's pregnant, so she's like in the Tower of Joy, and he's just like, okay, you're staying here, resting, because you're pregnant. And then all this stuff goes on. She may not even have known, because she's over in like some random part.
True.
Of Dorne or whatever.
Right. She may have been this information might have been kept from her. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it's a really interesting story, because to me,
and I don't think we'll get it in the show.
No.
I think we'll get it in the book when we eventually meet. When you eventually meet Howland Reed, if that happens.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Because Rhaegar, and I know we're on a big tangent here, but I love it. Because it is all the histories of
it's really the underlying theme of this chapter.
It really is. But to me, it's like Rhaegar. I mean, Cersei hints later on that Rhaegar just wasn't satisfied with, Elia Martell. She wasn't producing what he wanted, and so she says, I could have given him that. We could have avoided this war, But it looks like from Rhaegar's point of view, he wanted these bloodlines to merge. He had also studied this stuff. So, A Song of Ice and Fire, guys. But so anyways, that's just some stuff for you guys to kind of chew on and think about. I don't know. Send us a raven. Let us know your thoughts if you have theories on that. I'd like to know more about it, because I don't think it's done. I think everyone's just like, oh yeah, Lyanna and Rhaegar are getting, they got together, they love each other, and they did this to, bring Azor Ahai again.
Right.
The prince that was promised, or the Dawn, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know that, she really knew that, actually. So
yeah. Well, interesting thought here. Yeah. So we just did. So I just posted it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. The video we did, which was Adam Parker, Lord Parker, had sent us a theory to respond to, and we looked at it. So this is just a very quick aside here. So that theory would have to completely be tossed out the window. The theory was that by Ned Stark naming Jon Snow, he woke the Night King. Mm-hmm. Well, if that is what happened, then why would Rhaegar have been trying to create Azor Ahai?
Yeah. Right, exactly.
So
exactly. The Night King is there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I like, though, in that theory, it's not just the naming of Jon Snow, but yet their blood uniting. And so
Jon is literally ice and fire.
Yes, and so that union in itself, and that the consummating of that marriage, is exactly what awoke this next long night, or the Great Other, or whatever. So yeah, gosh, deep and sweaty. I like it. So anyways, talking about Lyanna here, just some things, I guess, from the book. She was more beautiful than that. So he starts to look at how they had carved these the statues, right? And interesting note here, really, they're only supposed to be the lords of Winterfell down there.
Yeah.
And Ned went against that, and he loved, and this is a tragedy. Right. And so he has, and there might be a few more of those down there. Maybe they just don't mention them, but I can't imagine that's the only other situation where the Lord of Winterfell said, I'm going to have my sister and my brother next to their father. You know what I mean? So anyways, there's that. They talk about the likeness, and Robert Baratheon's just like, she shouldn't be down here. Yeah. She shouldn't be down here.
Yeah, she, damn it, Ned, why did you have to bury her in a place like this? His voice was hoarse and remembered with grief. She deserved more than darkness. Ned says, she was a Stark of Winterfell. This is her place.
Yeah. And it is. And at this point, all we know is that she was, she was asking Ned to promise her something. We don't even know what that is. So, at this point, I remember when I was first reading, thinking, she promised, she wanted to be brought back to Winterfell.
Or something.
Something simple or whatever. And I was like, whatever, brushed it off. Not that big of a deal. Big deal. Okay. They go on a little bit more, and he kind of talks about her and just how much that he, loved her. And let's see here. Yeah, they start to talk about the Tower of Joy. All right, and this is where they start to talk about how, Ned had taken his companions down to the Tower of Joy. So we can talk a little bit about the, how the Robert's Rebellion happened and how he ended up getting there, because he right here mentions that he had Howland Reed with him, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So Robert's Rebellion breaks out. This is actually kind of awesome. I'll give you just a quick little summary of this. But so when they steal, when Rhaegar steals Lyanna Stark and takes her away, and Brandon is on his way to marry Catelyn Tully and changes course and goes south. He goes south. He and I forget who else went with him. They're demanding Rhaegar's head. They are charged with treason. Basically, punishment's coming, but they want their lord fathers, these were younger men, to answer for their son's crimes. And so then they call Brandon Stark down to King's Landing. And I bet there was sort of that's his heir. It's almost like he would rather go himself and let me see if I can free him. And I'm on a risk death to go down and see if I can get Brandon back home, Right. And they get there, and he demands trial by combat. And combat is the flames.
Fire, yeah.
And they have to watch each other die, and it's horrible. And so after that happens, they kill, the Mad King kills everyone, and then he wants Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark, and he literally tells Jon Arryn, send them or we're coming for them, etc. And Jon Arryn says, the hell with this. Calls his banners, okay, and rises up again. Literally, at that point, it's like he's one of, the seven kingdoms. Yeah. And he decides to declare war.
Yeah.
That's
kind
of a
and
big...
Jon Arryn, it's interesting that he didn't at all say I'm taking the throne.
Right? No. This was more just about and that's the thing. He was this father-like figure. He was close to these, boys growing up and stuff, and he didn't have any children of his own. And so it was just and he saw, I don't know, it's just a time of peace and good relationships, I think, between these houses. And so it's no, forget this. We're going to war.
Yeah.
And because Ned is going back at this point when he hears all this has happened. He has to go back to Winterfell, and he's got to call his banners. Yeah. And then Robert does the same. Yeah. It's just it's so awesome that, so that takes place. And as they get into Robert's Rebellion, and we'll do a whole thing on that later, but you get to Rhaegar's gone. Rhaegar is gone. He is nowhere to be, found. And he's with Lyanna Stark, and he's taken her to the Tower of Joy. We don't really know where he's at. He also took Sir Arthur Dayne, and I forget the other Kingsguard.
You don't really need an army when you have Sir Arthur Dayne.
No, you really don't. You don't. Sir Oswell Went, I think, is who. And Sir Gerald Hightower went as well. So those are important names. He took them with him there, and then he emerges late into this rebellion and shows up to lead some of the forces, and at the Battle of Trident is struck down. But kind of reluctant to show up, almost like he's taking care of stuff. Or I'm thinking spells and magic and power and crazy stuff is happening. But so he meets him there. There's the sacking of King's Landing, and I think it's after that then that Ned heard a rumor as to where Rhaegar was last in Dorne at the Tower of Joy. And he takes with him 6 companions. Martin, who are these? Theo Wool, Ethan Glover, Mark Riswell, Howland Reed, William Dustin, and Martin Cassell, and takes them to the Tower of Joy. So I was going to do some more research later and kind of look into those characters, but they get there. The only 2 to survive are Howland Reed and Ned Stark, and we get in there and they start. They go up and they find Lyanna, and this is where we can jump back into the book a little bit, and it kind of talks about how she. He found her. You guys have the quote here where he found her in blood, or she was fond of flowers, and she's clutching these flowers, right?
He said Lyanna was fond of flowers. They had found him still holding her body, silent with grief. The little Cronach man, Hallen Reed, had taken her hand from his. Ned could recall none of it. I bring her flowers when I can, he said. Lyanna was fond of flowers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, Ned says, I was with her when she died. She wanted to come home to rest beside Brandon and father. He could hear her still at times. Promise me, she had cried, in a room that smelled of blood and roses. Promise me, Ned. The fever had taken her strength, and her voice had been faint as a whisper, but he gave her his word. He had gone out.
The fear had gone out of his.
The fear had gone out of his sister's eyes. And so then Ned remembers how she smiled at him, and tightly, her fingers clutched around these roses, and then when they drop, it was interesting that they're black.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of the sad moment where he's kind of, when he's down there, he's remembering how all this happens. Later on, he'll get a fever dream too, where he starts to remember the battle of the Tower of Joy and what took place. And he doesn't really tell us much, but still kind of cool. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Then following that is when we get a little bit of Robert Baratheon talking about Lyanna, and he says, "I vowed to kill Rhaegar for her for what he did." And Ned says, "You did kill him." And he says, only once.
Yeah, only
and
once.
And he says, I dream about killing him every night. 1,000, deaths is less than he deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's interesting. He just the hatred that he had. That's why there is this burning passion. There's this love that he has for Lyanna that I'm just so stoked about. And then this bitterness that he never gets to have her, and it just sort of it changes. I mean, it affects his whole life.
And that ties back into the previous chapter where Viserys was talking about, what was it, the hired knives? I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
He kept talking about, Thom. It was always about the hired knives, and which wouldn't be that far off. This guy's so nutty about killing Rhaegar like 1,000 times in his dreams.
That's right.
So
that's right. He also was not upset at the way in which Elia Martell and her children were killed.
Yeah.
And that actually caused a little grief between Eddard and him for a while, but it's the love for his sister that really, and their time at the area and things that had really,
brought them together
and keeps them together. They are brothers, We get that later where, he's talking, I think this might be in the show, but he's just sort of like, I was never close with my brothers, you were my brother. I chose my brother.
Right.
And so that's neat. Let's see. Now they start talking about some of the once they
Jon Arryn.
Yeah, they start talking about Jon Arryn. Yeah, and I think we didn't really have that as a segment, but I think it's important to talk about. So you have some notes on that because there's one thing I do want to find. That's really good.
So I actually have one note in specific. So I bring this up every time it happens on Kindle. If something is highlighted a vast number of times, it'll show you exactly how many times it's been highlighted. So I have a line here that's been highlighted 4,203 times. And it is when they are talking about Jon Arryn being dead, and Robert is talking that he wanted what's his name, Lord Arryn, Robin Arryn to be fostered by Tywin Lannister. Ned would sooner entrust a child to a pit viper than to Lord Tywin, but he left his doubts unspoken. Some old wounds never truly heal and bleed again at the slightest word. Then the wife had lost her husband. He said carefully, perhaps the mother feared to lose the son. The boy is very young.
Right.
Yeah, so just talking about Tywin Lannister and how you can just tell they don't trust him. They don't Ned does not like Tywin Lannister.
Right. I mean, he goes on to say that Lysa should have been honored to sort of that Tywin would take him. I think they're all conspiring though. The Lannisters they want control over this child, and so and Lysa's smart enough to recognize that and to say. I mean, she kind of probably knew what was going on a little bit to some degree, and she also has been around Cersei enough that she's not. I know she's a little crazy and she's changed, but she's still smart enough to know that this is not where she needs to be. Oh, yeah. And there is no more protection really.
Yeah, I mean, just wait till Tyrion shows up at the Vale later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there's a part here where they start to talk about who should be the warden of the East, and I thought this was who does he want to be the warden of the East?
They don't decide. He says that he's like, it's something we're gonna have to deal with.
But
then it's just kind of left open.
Okay, so
he
he
just didn't want to
actually
leave it to a 6-year-old sickly.
Yeah, he just
child.
he says we'll have to figure.
I thought
that
he
out.
appointed somebody. He was like about to appoint somebody. I was trying to figure out if there was a name.
Well, that was the
attached to
thing that Ned kind of took aback a little bit because it was like, well, it's by right.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh no, we're not doing that right now, Ned. Come on.
Yeah.
What even he said, it's a time of peace, Robert. Like it's a time of peace. Let the boy have the title, and then hopefully he can grow during this time of peace, and then he could grow into that title, and it's his, and we never have to take it away and then give it back to him, essentially, which it just goes to show, Ned's right. That is sound, but I think he's sort of thinking. I mean, at that point, it sort of turns into like the Queen Regent situation where Lysa is in charge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's the mother of, So I don't know, but it is a little bit weird. I mean, you do kind of understand why Robert, wanted someone there in charge because Robin is sitting, in his house seat there, and making judgment calls.
Right.
He's sentencing men to die. I mean, in 86.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is a little wild. So there's that whole piece. All right. So then they start to talk about the wall a little bit, and it's funny, not funny, I guess. Robert just sort of says it's been there for thousands of years. It can wait. It can wait. So they'll talk about that eventually. There's things that they need to do. This is right where I'm sure they were about to mention a Mance Rayder reference, but Robert's not concerned with it. That's the concerns of the North.
Yeah, exactly. That's the concerns of the North.
Yeah. So
Starks and
right, and so he's not there. He's a selfish guy. So,
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
but he wants his friend there. And before we get into that, there's something I wanted to. It's kind of like a little side note here, but I thought it'd be interesting to think about. I thought about this this is no joke. I thought about this when I was reading, and I thought when I was younger, if my sister would have been, if we were in those kingdoms, and my sister would have been taken, I believe that my brothers would have called their banners as well, and would have rode to war with me to get her back. And I mean, so it is a great, story. And I think about that. I'm just like, we all kind of put ourselves in these characters' shoes for a little bit, and it's just sort of like, you guys would have been my Robert Baratheons, and we would have gone to war. Gosh dang it, because I have a younger sister that these guys grew up with, and knew in high school and stuff. She's just a year or so behind us, and think about that for a second. I don't know. It's just kind of it's what makes this story really sort of like, cool, and you can see yourself in it. And when you imagine growing up when you're fighting, with I don't know, sticks. Was I the only one who did that? I don't know. You hitting a tree and pretending it's something else. That's what you're thinking. Like, I mean, here's the thing. This is going to sound super corny, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but like, we had a tree house, right?
Yeah.
And Sarah was the one, my sister, who was up in the treehouse, and I had to rescue her. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I had to get her back. So, and but I don't know. So I just thought it was kind of a cool little thing because I like this idea of Lyanna Stark, and oftentimes the wildness that she had reminds Ned of Arya's wildness, right? But she's got that a different beauty than Sansa has. She definitely had that true Stark, look to her, but still beautiful. So it's the combination of Arya and Sansa that he can see in his sister, and so because later on when Sansa's like pleading for him to spare her direwolf, please, it reminds him of the pleading of his sister.
Yeah.
Back in the day. But all right, now let's move on to some other stuff here. So as they're talking about all of that, then it comes to it. Now we're here. Why did Robert Baratheon come north? Why did he come north?
Yeah, to name Ned Hand of the King.
Yeah.
And basically, he throws it at Ned, and it says, Ned dropped to one knee. The offer did not surprise him. What other reason could Robert have had for coming so far? The Hand of the King was the second most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms. He spoke with the king's voice, commanded the king's army, drafted the king's laws, and at times even sat upon the Iron Throne to dispense the king's justice when the king was absent or sick or otherwise indisposed. Which happens probably a lot with Robert Baratheon.
Right.
Robert was offering him a responsibility as large as the realm itself. It was the last thing in the world he wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is Ned he's expecting it. he's originally initially a couple chapters ago, he's happy that his old friend is coming, and in this time of grief they can meet and talk. But it's coming. You get these ill, signs and warnings and things that in the direwolf and the stag, and so here we go. We want him to be the hand of the king. Ned dreads that. There's all these references to when a Stark goes south, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And it's a reoccurring theme. And what's interesting is when Jon goes south, he's not a Stark. Necessarily.
Spoilers.
Or is he? That's just the show.
Yeah. No. Here we go. This is a great kind of end of the chapter here. Mm-hmm. For a moment, Eddard Stark was filled with a terrible sense of foreboding. This was his place, here in the north. He looked at the stone figures all around him, breathed deep in the chill silence of the crypt. He could feel the eyes of the dead. They were listening. He knew, and winter is coming.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, that's basically the end of that chapter. And Robert's kind enough to give him a couple of days or a night to sleep on it, but basically says, I'm not a patient man.
Yeah. And if you don't do it, I'm giving it to Jaime Lannister.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even think he says. Is it Tywin or he says? I think he says Jaime Lannister.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. But yeah, there you go. I mean, that's basically it for the chapter. Some cool stuff there. We got some background. We got some background on the rebellions. We'll talk more about the Greyjoy rebellion. It'll be coming up here and there. That's one of the more recent, bigger rebellions. You've got Roberts and then the Greyjoy rebellion, but both are mentioned in here too.
Yeah,
so
right.
which is neat. So all right, let's jump into the next section, which is our cool connections.
So one line we get here is Storm's End, which I thought would be a cool place to kind of take a look at. Storm's End is the seat of House Baratheon, the Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. The castle is located at Durin's Point on the northern coast of Shipwrecker Bay, south of the Bronze Gate and northeast of Griffin's Roof. The King's Road runs north from Storm's End through to the Stormlands to King's Landing, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms. So the Stormlands is actually like right next to King's Landing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really a land. It's really a one part of the realm that we hear probably the least about.
You're right.
In the books and the show, because because the Baratheons, spoilers, die so quickly that there's just nothing going on there.
Yeah.
And so Storm's End has some pretty cool history. It's surrounded by a massive outer curtain wall, 100 feet high and 40 feet thick on its thinnest side, and nearly 80 feet thick on its seaward side. So it is this massive, very thick castle. It's right on the bay, and it's all about the history of it. It stood for centuries, facing the terrible weather of Shipwrecker Bay, with little wear to show for it. Legend claims that it was built by Duran, the first Storm King during the Dawn Age, who declared a war against the gods after they killed his family and guest, ruining his wedding to their daughter, Eleni or something. It is said that during God's grief raised 6 castles, each larger and more formidable than the last, but all were destroyed by storms. The massive 7th castle, Storm's End, is called Duran's Defiance because it was able to endure the storms. Some believe it was because the children of the forest took a hand in its construction, using their magic to raise the wall. Others believe a young boy who grew up to be Bran the Builder advised him on the construction of it. So again, that's another thing where we don't really. There's always this kind of, every kingdom has and every house has some sort of hint of mysticism or magic ultimately behind it. We see it a lot with the Starks and the direwolves, and Daenerys with the dragons. We don't really see it as much with the other houses, but even something like this, they have this, there's some magic in their blood as well.
Right. And you have to remember sometimes, too, that the current lords of these regions were not, in the Age of Heroes, those were, Casterly Rock is not, you have Lannisport, which is named for the Lannisters, but Casterly Rock is not necessarily there, and it's now their home, right? And they rule it, but it wasn't always, there were other...
even the
kings, actually, they were,
even the Reach, it was something like the Tyrells. have it, but they weren't always the
Right.
Yeah.
We hear about that in the Dunk and Egg thing.
That's right.
And so you have like Storm's End, and isn't that where the Dundarians are from?
Yeah, they are.
And
They are.
their sigil is actually like a lightning bolt.
Yeah, and that's it's pretty neat because this keep or whatever is which we seen that in the we haven't really no, and so it's supposed to be this really well
because Stannis has
castle.
Dragonstone,
right,
which is the
right. So
Targaryens.
Renly I'm sure went back there. I don't know, did he? He seemed like he amassed out in the fields with I don't know. So anyways, that's cool though. That's neat to get a little history about Storm's End. We don't hear a whole lot about it. You're right, but we will talk about it as we go. Or do we actually? No, they are at Dragonstone.
Yeah,
they're he has Dragonstone
because there's a lot there when they're walking around the Maester there. But I was kind of wondering if we ever got to this keep. I don't think we do.
There's like 5 lines. I mean, even on the wiki, there's like 5 lines about it. During Game of Thrones, Renly Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, flees King's Landing with Loras Tyrell after the death of his brother, and then he's riding to Storm's End in the Reach, and then he hooks up with Marjorie and declares himself.
Right, that is never. We never really see him get back to
nothing
a
ever.
keep,
Nothing ever really happens. Maybe Gendry.
Well, he did. I guess
maybe
he did.
Gendry will go there or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Spoilers.
I guess I keep mixing this up. I want to correct myself because Storm's End is the keep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they say he goes to Storm's End, he did. Okay. Yeah. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, the Storm Lands is that area.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was the last one that sort of that last castle that sort of ended, this long line of these castles being destroyed by the storm. All right. So I think that's any other cool connections.